Before break, hopefully you remember that we were doing some labs to test what variables affect the heating of our atmosphere. The first lab we did, we explored color, light versus dark. And we did that because when you look at our planet, you'll notice that some areas are darker and some areas that are covered in snow and ice are actually very light. So how does that affect heating? If you remember, we did a lab where we had a can full of water that was silver and a can full of water that was black. And then we shined a light on them. And what we found is the darker can absorbed that light and turned it into heat, and the water inside got pretty hot. The silver can, you can even see here, reflects most of that light, so you don't create as much heat. Remember, light can change into heat. It's a different form of energy. The water in the silver can did not get as hot. In our next lab, we explored not color, but surface materials. So if we look again at this Earth, we'll notice that when the sun hits the Earth, it's either going to hit the water or it's going to hit the land. So we modeled that by, again, our lamp represents the sun, and this beaker of water represents the Earth's water, and this beaker with sand represents land. And we wanted to see, how do these two materials heat differently when a light is shined on them? So what I want you to do is find your blue sheet from lab, and the first thing you're going to do is fill out this top part, because we're going to analyze our data, but I want you to remember what analyze means. You could look back at your green sheet, look at the yellow posters in the back of the room, or look in your notebook, or maybe you remember. So what does it mean to analyze data? So pause the video and fill this in, and then come back when you're done. The next thing we're going to do to help us analyze the data is to create a graph of the data. Now, if you remember from our last lab, when we're looking at increases and decreases over time, we create a line graph so we can see when things go up and things go down, the change over time. So the first thing you're going to do is set up your graph. Please notice the elements of a graph: a title, a key, the X and Y axis labeled appropriately with units. So we're going to set up the graph, and then I will give you the average data from A and B day that you'll be graphing. Remember, in science, we don't want 1 or 2 points of data to graph. We want as much as we can. So you'll have, I believe it is 15 groups worth of data that's been averaged. So the next thing you need to do is pick up a white graph sheet. Pause the video, go pick one up, and then come back. The first thing you're going to want to do is fill out your title. What is this a graph of? And again, be as descriptive as possible, so if someone didn't know what you did in lab, they would understand what this graph is. The next thing I would fill out is your x-axis. It's okay to look back at the last graph we did together to remind you how we filled this out. So what's going to go on the x-axis, and remember to use as much of the graph as possible. Don't squeeze all of your information into the corner. Then you want to set up your y-axis. What goes on the y-axis? Remember, again, we had a symbol we used here that if you don't need some of your data, for instance, I think we went from 0 to 20 on our last graph, so think about what makes sense. And again, use as much of the y-axis as you can. As you plot your data, please use 2 different colors. Make a key here to show which represents the temperature of the water and which represents the temperature of the sand. And lastly, here is the data you'll be plotting. So pause the video when you need to. For sure, pause it here so you can plot your data. So this is the time for your sand temperatures. Remember, at 15 minutes we turned off the light. And this is your temperature in Celsius for sand, and down here is your water. When you're done with this, you'll move on to the next video.